Here's the thing. I absolutely love Metroidvanias. Well, I love a lot of games. But I love the structure of exploring a large map, finding new abilities as I go, and returning to discover new areas I couldn't reach before. Newer games like Metroid Dread, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, and the Ori games, each of these just clicked with me within a few hours or so of playing them. But what about arguably one of the most beloved Metroidvanias of all time? I didn't fall in love with Hollow Knight the first time I played it, or even the second. In fact, I was turned off by so many of Hollow Knight's gameplay systems during my first two attempts that I thought maybe it just wasn't for me. But earlier this year, with the release of Silksong looming, I was listening to people gush about Hollow Knight on a podcast and decided to give it one more go. Finally, on my third try, something changed. Suddenly, the game that I didn't understand for so long became one of my all-time favorites. Here's the story of my journey with Hollow Knight, why it's so special to me, and why I can't wait for Silksong. I'm primarily a physical game collector, so I didn't get to Hollow Knight until several years after its initial release. It wasn't until around 2020 that I got my hands on a physical Switch copy and immediately booted it up to see what all the fuss was about. I was excited. The buzz online was that this was an absolute masterpiece and among one of the greatest games ever made. The art was stunning, the soundtrack intoxicating, but something about the gameplay just felt off to me. The opening area felt kind of confusing. I tried pulling up a map several times to find that there wasn't one available, and getting crushed by basic enemies didn't feel enjoyable. After wandering around in circles for what felt like an hour or two and losing all of my geos several times, I came to the conclusion that maybe this wasn't going to be for me. It wasn't that the game was bad. I could recognize that it was well made and see how some people would enjoy it, but it just didn't click. So after a few hours, I decided to put it down. A year or two later, after a conversation with some friends, I was convinced to give the game another try. Honestly, it didn't take much convincing as I wanted to love it as much as everybody else. Maybe I was looking for something that would hold my hand a little more when I first played it, or maybe I just didn't stick it out long enough. This time, I learned how to get the maps and pushed myself to explore more outside of the opening areas. I even started to get the hang of how combat worked. But after multiple attempts of beating my head against early game bosses and a general lack of overall direction, I felt justified in my conclusion that Hollow Knight wasn't for me. The map felt wildly overwhelming and the story felt nearly non-existent. It's not that I was looking for exact waypoints necessarily, I just wanted a little more direction, and Hollow Knight doesn't do that. It places a large emphasis on exploration, so much so that it feels like getting lost is core to the experience. At this point, that didn't feel like what I was looking for, so once again, I put the game away and forgot about it for another couple of years. They say that the third time is the charm, which is certainly an overused phrase, but in this case, it couldn't have been more true. As I said earlier, after hearing yet another group of people praise the game, and the FOMO of Silksong on the horizon, I decided to give it another go. This time, I told myself to slow down. I didn't have specific goals in mind, I just existed in the world and focused on what was in front of me. When I got stuck, I allowed myself to look up a hint for where to go next, and began to find a rhythm for how the game should be experienced. And then, it happened. After a few hours, I arrived in a new area, the City of Tears, and it just clicked. The sound of the rain, the incredible score, and the absolute massive scale. It allowed me to appreciate the true beauty of the world Team Cherry created. For the first time, after several attempts, I was falling in love with Hollow Knight. This is when I noticed the first thing that made Hollow Knight feel so special, the atmosphere. Let's get the obvious out of the way. The hand-drawn art style is gorgeous and has a way of sticking with you even when you're not playing. Each area looks and feels distinct, but somehow manages to fit the overall tone of the game. Green Path is lush and full of life. The fungal wastes have an eerie feel to them. Crystal Peak is dangerous yet vibrant, and the City of Tears just oozes a feeling of sorrow. But it's not just the visuals that sing. Hollow Knight's soundtrack is captivating. The subtle instrumentals of each area match the tone and the art perfectly. Look, I know I keep bringing up the City of Tears, but the gentle melody in this section of the map makes the rain feel so authentic, like it's outside of my own window. On the other end of the map, Deep Nest's theme is unsettling and lonely. This is a common theme. Each new area is coupled with music that adds real weight to the overall experience. And then there are the little audio touches. There isn't any recorded dialogue, but instead distinct noises of each of the characters you talk to that sound like total gibberish to us, but feel authentic to the world. The subtle hums of background creatures and haunting cries of distant enemies you haven't seen yet, coupled with the echo of the knight's own footsteps, add a level of authenticity to the whole experience. Each of these elements combined create a feeling of a world that exists despite the presence of the player's character, a world that truly feels alive. Okay, so we've established that Team Cherry has created a one-of-a-kind world. But what about traversing it? Does the moment-to-moment gameplay hold up? Short answer, yes. I've played my share of games over the years, and the exploration in Hollow Knight is among the best of them. In standard Metroidvania fashion, every new ability you unlock, like the dash or the wall jump, doesn't just open up the combat options, it opens up the world in interesting ways. There are moments in this game where you think you've seen everything the map has to offer, but a new ability or a breakable wall will uncover multiple new areas. Some of these areas are missable entirely. The game never tells you where to go. It just quietly invites you to try, to experiment, and to discover hidden routes on your own. This sense of freedom is what makes exploring Hollow Nest so addictive. Layered on top of that is the combat. It looks simple, but you'll quickly find out that even basic enemies can send you back to your last resting spot if you try to button mash your way through these encounters. Hollow Knight asks you to be patient and learn from your failures, and the responsiveness of the controls makes victory feel satisfying and earned. In addition to your standard abilities, the various charms allow the player to mold the combat experience with benefits that match their own playstyle. What makes everything so satisfying is how these two parts work together. Exploration leads to upgrades that make combat feel smoother. Combat pushes you to explore deeper so that you can find charms, mash shards, and spells that change your playstyle. It's this cycle of discovery and mastery that keeps the game fresh for dozens of hours. The gameplay rewards curiosity, persistence, and adaptability in a way that is just endlessly rewarding. One of the most intriguing parts of Hollow Knight is the story, or maybe I should say the mystery. Team Cherry doesn't hand you a clear narrative. Instead, it's scattered throughout Hollow Nest in the cryptic dialogue of NPCs, the ruins of forgotten civilizations, and even item descriptions. Cutscenes are minimal, and you are never spoon-fed the story beats. It's something you uncover. You slowly piece together the fall of Hollow Nest, the infection that spread across the kingdom, and the tragic history that many of these characters share. I won't sit here and pretend that I understood what happened in Hollow Nest my first time through, but the intrigue I was left with pushed me to want to know more. This is the type of story that keeps me up at night as I read numerous breakdowns of the timeline and watch every lore video I can find. Discovering new details that you missed in subsequent playthroughs really adds to the overall experience. I won't spoil any of it here, but it's worth taking the time to uncover the mystery yourself. And honestly, that mystery is part of what makes Hollow Knight so unforgettable. So what makes Hollow Knight so special? And why did it take me 3 tries to love it? It's because Hollow Knight doesn't beg for your attention. It doesn't hand you the story in cutscenes. It doesn't bombard you with tutorials. It trusts you to explore, to fail, to learn, and to piece things together yourself. With maybe the help of a hint or two on the internet, of course. Hollow Knight isn't a game that's meant to be rushed. It's not about checking boxes or speedrunning your way through the map. It's about getting lost, struggling, and then finding your way again. Sometimes, the best games don't click immediately. They can be a slow burn, and only reveal their brilliance when they've had time to sink in a bit. So if you've bounced off Hollow Knight before, don't feel bad. I did too, more than once. Give it another chance, because after a little persistence, Hollow Knight might just become one of your all-time favorites. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. If you've got a story about a game that only clicked after a few tries, drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more gaming stories. Bye for now.